Hey everyone, welcome back to the NPTE podcast. This is Will Crane, your host. Thank you so much for joining me as we go through the content you need in order to absolutely dominate on test day. So today, as we go through the content, I just wanted to talk about some of the effective study strategies that you can use in the final weeks heading into your test. I know that as we're recording this, we're coming just a few weeks away from the April 2023 exam, but this is certainly applicable to any exam date. But the idea here is, how do you best use your time in the weeks leading up to the test? So I wanted to talk today about cramming and crash courses. But before I get to that, just a quick reminder that we are starting our PT crash course. We're in the middle of our PTA crash course, but 3 weeks before every test day, we run a crash course dedicated to helping you know the content you need for test day. It's meant to be quick, inexpensive, and a way to really boost your score so you can get an amazing score on test day. And I'd encourage you to check that out. You can check it out over at ptfinalexam.com. Plus, if you haven't already, be sure to check out our podcast newsletter. This is where you can get some of our cheat sheets and tips, a bunch of practice questions. Go to ptfinalexam.com/podcast, where you can take advantage of that right away. All right, so today I wanted to talk about cramming and crash courses and maybe a little bit of the difference. A lot of times when people ask me, what is your crash course? I say that it's like cramming, but better. And so before we get to the crash course, let's just define our terms here a little bit. So as we talk about cramming, first of all, let's consider cramming. I think, statistics say that something like 98% of students admit to cramming for some exam. Of course, what do they say? 98% of statistics are made up on the spot. But in this case, I think it is clearly the case that cramming is ubiquitous. It's just all over the place. Everyone does it. The night before your big exam, you take some time and you spend 6 hours going over the content you need for the test the following day. And the question is, what is cramming and does it actually work? So in a very literal sense, a cramming, this is when you are looking and familiarizing yourself with content right before, we'll say, a very stressful test situation. So typically speaking, cramming is done the night before, the day before a very big test. Usually a lot of stress involved because you feel like you have a lot to go over in a very, very short amount of time. And the trouble is that with cramming, what happens is that you become very visually fluent in the content, meaning you recognize it very well. However, you are very poor at the recall. So recognition is strong, but recall is very weak. So what this means is that as you cram, you are effectively trying to see as many things as you possibly can in the hopes that something will show up on the test that you're able to recognize and certainly this could happen. You recognize something and then you're able to select the correct answer based on that. However, when it comes to especially testing like the NPTE, which is more evaluative, or I guess what would you consider on the as you consider how they are testing you, it is less about recognition and more about understanding and application, meaning that just pure recognition of the content will be insufficient. And so you've got to be able to recall the content and certainly be able to work with it in your own words. And so this is what's called a schema. I've talked about this before. In psychology, they talk about a schema. It's a framework with which you operate on any given task. You're able to put it into its appropriate framework, get the correct amplitude, the correct pattern. If we're talking motor control, getting the correct pattern of movement. What happens though is that as you go through a cram session, it can actually be counterproductive in some ways. And so I've got those of you who are watching the video version of this podcast, I pulled a couple of quotes, one from Stanford, one from the BBC. But the point is that what can actually happen is after you've crammed, the stress associated with cramming can actually backfire and cause you to score lower because your brain, you thought you knew something, you were able to recognize it, but your brain tends to block it out because of the stress associated with cramming. So in a very literal sense, waiting to cram the night before a test can be detrimental to your score rather than having a more healthy or a healthier or more effective study plan ahead of time. We'll talk about that here in just a moment. Another thing to look at is that as you consider the difference between recognition, being able to see the content, versus recall and reformulation of the content, that this is something I get emails all the time from students who are like, hey, I'm a really good PT student. My patients love me, but why is it that I'm struggling with this test? And it's most likely because they're either kinesthetically aware of the content, or perhaps they're able to recognize a wide variety of content, but they can't actually make evaluative decisions based on that. They're not able to move into the application portion of the content. Rather, they are able to recognize a lot of content and possibly, and quite probably, have fabulous clinical skills. Just a question of, do you actually know what's going on, and can you articulate that? And that's the idea with the NPTE, is that it's forcing you to articulate what you have learned over your 3 years of PT school. So in a very real sense, spending 5 hours looking at the content will honestly probably be a little bit detrimental to you the night before the test. And that's why you'll see this information all the time. Don't cram, don't stay up late the night before the test. Don't try to, in fact, a lot of people will go so far as to say, don't study the day before the test. And I'm kind of opposed to that, just on personal, I'll talk about that here in a moment. But in a general sense, they're not wrong that the stress of trying to cram it all in the day or the night before the test can be detrimental. Rather, a healthier perspective or a healthier look at the content is to go over small chunks of content over a longer period of time. Small chunks of content over a longer period of time. So in a real sense, rather than 5 or 6 hours of studying the night before, it would be best to do a half hour a day for the week leading up to it. So I guess even though it adds up to about the same amount of time, the smaller chunks over a longer period actually leads to better memory and better recall, so you can actually have a better performance on test day. So back to the crash course. So I run a crash course 3 weeks before every test day, and I'll tell you how I started it, and I'll tell you a little bit about what our goal is in the crash course. But a crash course, just pulling a few definitions, I thought it was fun to pull definitions. Crash course, a class in which a lot of information is taught in a short period of time, or a rapid and intense course of study. I like to differentiate crash course from cramming. Cramming is a high stress night before type event, whereas a crash course, it is a series, certainly fast paced, but a series of rapid and intense information that comes at you ideally well ahead of the actual exam day. And so in our case, we run a crash course 3 weeks before every test day. Now the goal of the crash course is, as described, to go over a lot of content in a short amount of time. Now, granted, most of the content is stuff you've probably already seen. I mean, not just probably, you learned it in PT school. Now the goal is to help you to recall it for test day so you can apply it to test questions. And so the way we run the crash course is that we have tons of content related to musculo, neuro, and cardio, the big 3 systems on the exam, related to their big subcategories: examination, differential diagnosis, and intervention. We cap that all off. Every week we have questions. We go through practice questions. We show you how to answer questions in a way that is logical, sequential, and is very helpful for your actual test. So we try to go over not just the content, but also how to apply it to test questions. And we do it in a rapid and intense way. So that's why we start at 3 weeks before every test day, meant to be better than cramming. So cramming is the night before. This is rather a 3-week period right before every test day. So the way the crash course was born, it was actually, we were coming into COVID. So it was March of 2020 when everything was shutting down. They just canceled the April exam administration. And I'll be honest, PT final exam, the whole business kind of depends on people taking the exam, taking courses, and everything came to just a screeching halt. The wheels of progress, everything came to a stop. As you can imagine, all of you who are listening to this obviously experienced this in real time, but schools delayed graduation dates. They canceled the exam administration. There was just a lot going on, and there was a lot of concern about, okay, how is this going to look going forward? Well, we had one of our corporate partners that reached out to us and said, hey, Will, we got a whole bunch of students who are planning on testing they're planning on testing April. In this case, we're talking 2020. We have a lot of folks who are planning on testing in April. Obviously, that's canceled. They're a little bit worried about remembering everything for test day. How would you feel about running a quick course to help refresh them on their content right before test days? And so in this case, the test date was delayed quite a bit. And so what we ended up doing is we ended up putting together a brief crash course meant to be a short, rapid, intense course of study a couple of weeks before test day. And so it's gone through a few iterations, but we really settled in quite nicely on hitting the biggest systems, cardio, musculo, and neuro. This is where 75% of the test is located. and to go through as much content as we could in a short amount of time. Now, you'll note that it is intense and brief. So this is how it differs from our VIP course. The VIP course is meant to be very robust, and I'll dare say even lengthy, to go over all the content in each system to lead you through in a very sequential and logical way to get you ready for the test. Most people end up using the crash course as a way to study for the last few weeks right before test day. So let's talk about what makes the most effective study habit, especially leading into test day. So this is back to where I mentioned earlier that you'll hear a lot, people will say, don't study the day before the test. And again, I kind of kick against that just because I would go crazy just sitting and watching like Lord of the Rings binge trilogies on the Lord of the Rings trilogy the day before the test, or whatever Netflix series or whatever. Like it doesn't make any sense in my mind to just sit and veg out the day before. However, I do recommend having what I call stress-free or relaxed studying. So it's not cramming, it's relaxed studying. So what does that look like? Well, for me, it involved going through my flashcards. I had gone through them 1,000 times before. I was looking at them one more time just to make sure I was familiar, obviously visual recognition there, but making sure that I could articulate what was on the card. I would go through a set of like 5 or 10 practice questions and just make sure that I understood the concept contained therein, and really try to go through the content in a very relaxed way. So that's what I like to do the day before the test. But back to the crash course. The crash course is all about going through a very large amount of content very quickly, but having ample time to actually digest it so that you can not just recognize it, but actually recall it for test day. And so therefore we like to give lots of mnemonics, memory devices, memory aids, things to help you. There's just lots and lots of examples. Like in our neuro one, you've heard me talk about my fun little acronyms for the brachial plexus and the terminal branches of the brachial plexus. So like the radial nerve, the radial nerve is a beast, or we've got the median nerve is the half loaf of pumpernickel. I mean, you name it, you can have a fun little acronym, and it helps it stick in your brain for test day. So when it comes to studying the last few weeks before the test, I definitely recommend joining the crash course. Again, meant to be quick and inexpensive. And if you have a group of 5 or more, you can actually get a sweet discount. So be sure to reach out to us there. You can go over to ptfinalexam.com/contact if you want a sweet discount if you have a group of 5 or more. But the best way to study is to go over a short amount of content in a brief time period. So this is where my recommendation of 2 to 4 hours most days is a good target for your studies. So you go through a brief amount of content and go over that frequently over the weeks leading up until test day. Try to work with the content, actually put it in your own words. This is where flashcards can be helpful. This is where our workbook is very, very helpful. Going through the workbook is a very active way to learn. Just try to do more than reread the textbook or even just recopy the textbook. Be sure to stay on task and study with a group that keeps you on task. So studying doesn't mean studying with your very best friend. It usually means studying with someone who will keep you on task, which could be your best friend. But let's be honest, sometimes it can be a diverse group that can help you stay on task to actually learn the content and make sure that everyone knows the content. And then the last thing is just make sure that you teach or speak the content aloud, putting it into your own words. I call this the Will Crane test. So if I were to call you at the end of your study session and say, hey, what did you just learn? Could you articulate in your own words what it is you just learned without looking at your notes? If you could, that tells me that you're in good shape for the test. If you can't, then it probably means you need to go look at it again. So there you go. There's a bunch of stuff about cramming and crash courses, effective study patterns. All these things are critical to making sure you have a good experience on test day. And let's be honest, this is one of those tests you'd like to do just once and be done. I would encourage you to check out all the courses we have over at ptfinalexam.com, especially our crash course, which actually, I'm recording this here just before April. I'm actually going to go live, and we're going to start our crash course tonight. But it's a lot of fun, go through lots and lots of content, try to do it very inexpensively, make it very accessible for students. And again, you can get a pretty sweet discount if you get a group of 5 or more together. So with that, we'll bring today to a conclusion. As always, much appreciated. I hope you have a fabulous day. Happy studying all around. And be sure to check out all of our other episodes for other quick tips about studying. We've got tons of practice questions available to you. In the meantime, stay safe, happy studying. Will Crane fist pumps all around, and I'll catch you in the next one.